at Marokopa. Andrew McRae reports.
Police believe Mr Phillips owned a 2004 Honda XR400 and a 2019 Honda XR F50. They say the appeal for specific information on the bikes may lead to speculation they could be involved, but this is not the case. Police say it's just one line of inquiry and they want to know where the bikes are. Conditions today have meant air searches resumed, along with surf lifesaving crews out along the coast and ground searches. However, searching for the day has now ended. Police say nothing of interest has been found. The Phillips family has asked for privacy, saying while they appreciate public interest and concern, they want to concentrate on the search.
A truck driver who was tested positive for COVID-19 has been transferred to quarantine. The essential worker was tested after a household member was identified as a contact. Health officials say he made deliveries at supermarkets in Auckland, Bay of Plenty and Waikato. The Director of Public Health, Caroline McElnay, says he wore a mask and kept social distance.
The supermarket the truck driver visited for his work are not listed as locations of interest as they were delivery areas not accessible to the public. The company involved has immediately stood down staff who were in close proximity to the driver.
Dr McElnay is urging people to check the Ministry of Health website for details of other locations and follow instructions. The Travel Agents Association is optimistic vaccination levels will be high enough in 8 weeks for the Trans-Tasman bubble to reopen. The government has extended its suspension until at least November. The association president, Brett Thomas, says both Australia and New Zealand are working hard to boost vaccination levels.
Both countries are moving forward very quickly on that, and within 8 weeks one would expect that their numbers will be at a sufficient level that the governments will be able to determine an opening date for the border between the two countries.
The government's planning a third red flight from Melbourne to bring New Zealanders home. People stuck in Australia will also be able to apply for an MIQ room in the release on Monday. The man charged with murdering a 16-year-old girl in South Auckland last weekend has made a brief appearance in Manukau District Court. The 23-year-old was arrested this morning. He has been granted interim name suppression and was remanded in custody. The teenage girl's body was found in Manurewa last Saturday afternoon. The government will be keeping the school holidays in 2 weeks' time, as they are, saying it would be more disruptive to move them. The Education Minister Chris Hipkins says he wanted to give people certainty. The school break will go ahead from October 2nd, meaning Auckland parents still in lockdown could be facing at least 9 weeks at home with their children. Moving now into sports news, the stand-in Black Caps captain Tom Latham says they feel safe and ready to go for the team's first match in Pakistan in 18 years. Having not toured the country since 2003 due to security concerns, New Zealand play Pakistan in the first of 3 one-dayers in Rawalpindi tonight. Latham says the squad have been treated well and feel safe.
New Zealand Cricket and our Players Association have, all the protocols in place to keep us safe, and we certainly feel that way here. So, and we're just looking forward to getting stuck into the cricket. As you said, it's been 18 years since New Zealand last toured here, so it's a bit of a historic occasion to be back.
Meanwhile, Virat Kohli will step down as India's 2020 captain after the Men's T20 World Cup in November. Kohli says he needs to give himself space to continue leading India in Test cricket and one-day internationals. New Zealand Hockey's withdrawn all its teams from international tournaments until at least June next year because of ongoing travel restrictions concerning COVID-19. It means both the Black Sticks men's and women's sides won't compete in next Hockey Pro League Championships starting in November. The withdrawal from international play will also impact the build-up of both teams for July's World Cups and the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. Australia is also withdrawn from the international play, and Hockey New Zealand hope to organise Trans-Tasman Games in the interim. And that is your news and sport.
Tomorrow morning, the hero worship that enabled Oscar Pistorius' bad behaviour for years. Tim Rowan on his podcast, False Idol. Andrew Coburn's been investigating what US President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. He says it's extraordinary how inept it is. And Michael Blenko on the last days of extinct creatures. including the huia. Ko Kinhilaho, join me Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight, Aharoe Saturday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, mostly cloudy with isolated showers today and fine tomorrow. Waikato to Kapiti Coast, including the Central High Country and Bay of Plenty, mostly cloudy today with isolated showers. Fine spells increasing tomorrow, but isolated afternoon showers for Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers easing tomorrow evening, strong southeasterlies easing tonight. Wellington and Wairarapa, occasional showers becoming isolated tomorrow and clearing to fine in Wellington. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, fine today, apart from some cloud in Bulla, showers developing tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy today with a few showers in Canterbury and the Kaikoura coast, mostly fine tomorrow. Otago and Southland, fine apart from coastal cloud, isolated showers tomorrow afternoon or evening, mainly in Southland and Clutha, and for the Chatham Islands, a few showers. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Aharoe Saturday. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi mō te rā, Sarah. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Police are investigating the death of 3 children in Timaru after officers were alerted to the triple homicide last night. Emergency services were called to the Queen Street flat in the suburb of Parkside just after 10 o'clock last night. And as Timothy Brown reports, police say the family had only left MIQ a week ago after arriving in the country from South Africa.
Police officers arrived at the Oamaru stone-clad flat, just a couple of 100 metres down the road from Timaru Hospital, to find the 3 children dead. The trio were siblings, 3-year-old twins and a 7-year-old. Detective Inspector Scott Anderson says they only arrived in the South Canterbury town from South Africa in the last week.
Emergency services also located a woman at the property and she was transported to Timaru Hospital and is in a stable condition.
Scott Anderson says no one else is being sought by the police.
The investigation into this tragedy is still in its very early stages, but we can confirm that no one else is being sought in relation to the deaths of the 3 children. Police are still working to notify all next of kin, and for that reason, and to protect the privacy of those impacted by this tragedy, at this stage, police will not be releasing further details regarding the victims.
Canterbury District Commander, Superintendent John Price, wouldn't say who reported the matter to police.
A person notified us who had got to the address, and they rang us and we responded with other first responders, St John's and police. I can't say who at this stage, it's all part of the investigation.
Neighbour Jade Whaley says she and her husband heard noises at the property shortly after 9:30 last night.
It was about 20 to 10. It was a moaning. It was that loud. It was just like this yelling. And they said, we paused the TV, went and had a wee look for what's going on, and then it carried on, and then heard it again.
She says the tragedy has hit the community hard, especially after 5 teenagers were killed in a car crash north of Timaru last month. Aoraki Area Commander, Inspector Dave Gaskin, echoed that sentiment and says the police are working with a number of agencies to provide support in the community.
This is yet another incredibly sad event for the residents of Timaru, and people in our community will be feeling it, especially after the recent event where we lost the lives of 5 young men in a car accident. The police are working with a number of our community partners, providing support for anyone who is affected by the event, and if anyone is, we urge them to come forward and we'll make sure they get the assistance they require.
The police say it is too early to speculate about when charges will be laid.
It is 5:10 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mō te whakarongo mai. E haere aki nei, coming up, can a plan to keep the America's Cup in Auckland compete with international bids? In breaking news, the case of the NPC rugby players who wrongly obtained exemptions to travel out of Auckland's Level 4 lockdown is now in the hands of police. New Zealand Rugby confirmed yesterday that it had removed 6 players from provincial squads and ordered them back to Auckland after being alerted to errors in their applications for a COVID-19 travel exemption. But NZR declined to say exactly what the errors were. The players had travelled from Auckland to Wellington, Hawke's Bay, Manawatu, Bay of Plenty and Northland after 5 unions applied for exemptions. MB confirmed to Checkpoint the players were issued business travel documentation and those documents were immediately cancelled when NZR alerted it to the error. We asked the Ministry whether there was any deceit involved in the applications. In response, it said the case has now been referred to police and it couldn't comment further. We've contacted all 5 unions involved and haven't received a response. We've also requested an interview with New Zealand Rugby. It declined. It says its advice is that all health order breaches are referred to police. A Mount Maunganui bakery has been forced to close for 14 days and throw out all their stock after a COVID-infected truck driver from Auckland visited twice. There are 11 new cases of COVID in the community today, all of them in Auckland. But the Ministry of Health has identified several locations of interest outside Auckland, which were visited by the driver in the past week. Hamilton's Mayor says the fact the driver made multiple deliveries across the Waikato and Bay of Plenty is a wake-up call about the risks of spreading the virus to wider Aotearoa. William Ray reports.
At most locations, the Ministry says people only need to monitor for symptoms, then self-isolate and get tested if any develop. But for 2 locations, BP Toriko in Tauranga and Upper Crust Bakery in Mount Maunganui, people are being urged to isolate immediately and seek testing. The owner of Upper Crust Bakery, John Paul Vandermeys, says that because the driver visited them twice, they've had to close completely for 14 days and he's had to throw out all his stock.
So first contact interest was on the Saturday, so that's our weekend staff, and then on Tuesday, so that's our midweek staff, so that's our whole team down.
The supermarkets the driver made deliveries to have not been identified. The Ministry of Health's Director of Public Health, Dr Carolyn McElnay, says that's because he only visited areas which aren't accessible to the public.
The company involved has immediately stood down staff who were in close proximity to the driver and have been assessed as being contacts following a risk assessment completed by public health officials.
Dr McElnay says the driver was wearing a mask and maintained social distance. The Mayor of Hamilton, Paula Southgate, says the incident's a reminder that COVID could reach outside Auckland despite the regional lockdown.
This is why people can't be complacent about the rules that apply to them, and they've got to take every precaution, sanitise, wear their masks, keep in their bubbles where possible.
The Tauranga City Councillor for Mount Maunganui, Steve Morris, echoed that warning.
It is a wake-up call that people who live outside of Auckland can come into contact with those that have COVID-19. And you look at cases where people have snuck through the Auckland boundary, in one case to get McDonald's and other cases to go on holidays. And it really reinforces the point. The lockdown is there for a reason.
The couple who breached the Auckland lockdown to travel to Wanaka last week have still yet to be charged. William Willis and Hannah Rawnsley left Auckland last Thursday under an essential worker exemption and flew to Queenstown via Hamilton and Wellington, where they rented a car to drive to Wanaka. They were caught by police on Saturday and later in a statement accepted what they did was irresponsible and inexcusable. Police say a thorough investigation into the incident is continuing. Meanwhile, 3 young men were arrested in Oakune and charged with breaching the Auckland lockdown. 2 23-year-olds and an 18-year-old are accused of misusing essential worker documentation to go skiing at Mount Ruapehu. The local DHB and iwi, Uenuku and Ngāti have been reassured the trio posed no risk to the community. But the chair of the Uenuku Charitable Trust, Aidan Gilbert, is concerned about other lockdown escapees.
I guess there's 3 people that were discovered. I'm not quite sure how many more there are in our area that haven't been. So still a concern, and we're still on alert in terms of that. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is another discovery of some that have managed to, what we say, escape dodge.
And a short time ago, the Ministry of Health has updated its advice for people who visited the BP Tauriko in Tauranga between 7:45am and 9:15am last Saturday. That was September 11. It says only people on the forecourt need to get tested and they must self-isolate for 5 days. The Trans-Tasman bubble has no chance of reinflating for at least another 8 weeks. Meanwhile, with COVID case numbers continuing to increase in New South Wales, Victoria and the Australian Capital Territory, the government has put the kibosh on any hopes of the bubble opening anytime soon. But while many stranded New Zealanders are still searching for a way home, others are hoping vaccination numbers could see quarantine-free travel back in time for Christmas. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
After foreshadowing the decision earlier this week, the government confirmed there will be no quarantine-free travel with Australia until at least mid-November.
Obviously, what we have at the moment in Australia is certainly in at least a couple of states uncontrolled outbreaks, and in another one that they're struggling to control. And so for now, we think this is the appropriate position to be in.
For Tony and Coral Revel, who have been stuck in New South Wales for almost 3 months, this news has hit hard.
Absolutely devastated. The hardest thing to deal with is the fact that we don't know what's going on.
The couple flew out on what was supposed to be a 3-week holiday on the 24th of June to see their grandchildren. But just 3 days later, Sydney went into lockdown and the borders closed. Efforts to fly out on emergency red zone flights have also been unsuccessful. The couple, who are in their late 70s and early 80s, didn't qualify, despite Tony's underlying health conditions.
I've missed a pacemaker check, missed a cardiologist appointment, and with all the stress of this, I've had an attack of shingles on the side of my face.
The couple say they've had sleepless nights and feel locked out of their own country. They want the government to offer flights home for those who remain stranded. Grant Robertson says because the bubble has been closed for 8 weeks, those stranded in Australia will now be able to try their luck at getting an MIQ spot next week through the new lobby system.
Flights from Australia will be in October and November. Travellers from Australia should visit the MIQ website to find out how to participate in the room release on Monday. In addition to that, a third managed red flight from Australia to New Zealand is also planned for those in emergency situations.
Until now, red flights fly from Sydney, meaning those in other parts of Australia with lower case numbers have to essentially travel into a COVID hotspot to fly home. However, the next flight on the 26th of September will fly from Melbourne. But that's little comfort for those who can't cross the New South Wales border. The minister also signalled that even after 8 weeks, the bubble may not reopen, although the government won't completely rule it out.
We have a desire to get New Zealanders vaccinated, and then once we do that, that opens up a series of options for us. I'm not going to preempt any of those today, but the more people we get vaccinated and the quicker we get them vaccinated, the more options open up for us.
House of Travel's Brent Thomas is more optimistic.
What we can see is that both countries are moving forward very quickly on that, and within 8 weeks one would expect that their numbers will be at a sufficient level that the governments will be able to determine an opening date for the border between the two countries.
Brent Thomas says by November many people will be looking to Christmas with the hope of reuniting with loved ones. But for people like Tony and Coral, they're just looking to get home.
Homai o whakaro, love your feedback on that one. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. The bubble, should it open up state by state or should the government treat, Australia as a whole? Let us know your thoughts. And when you think it will be open again. So 8 weeks is the extension on the freeze there. Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 5:20. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The door may still be ajar for Auckland to host the America's Cup in 2024. A decision on a host city was due to be announced today. Instead, Team New Zealand says they'll need more time to assess 3 international venue proposals, as well as a last-minute Auckland bid. Felicity Reid has this report.
21 years after their first successful defence on home waters, Emirates Team New Zealand do it again in a new class of boat that proves Kiwis can fly. Sailing's most treasured prize, the America's Cup, stays in New Zealand.
But will it stay in New Zealand? The multi-million-dollar question. Team New Zealand says it's reviewing bids from Spain, Ireland and Saudi Arabia. Then this morning, news is a fourth possibility, an 11th hour one, from much closer to home. Businessman Mark Dunphy is making a last-ditch attempt to keep the regatta in the city of sails by promising to find local investment. However, Team New Zealand CEO Grant Dalton says Team New Zealand have yet to see anything concrete from Dunphy, and the Auckland bid has some catching up to do to the international proposals that are on the table.
But we don't have a proposal at the moment from Auckland. We have an indication to try and find the money, but no company could write a business plan, 3-year business plan, particularly a company that's a leader in an industry, based on hope.
Dalton doesn't seem convinced Auckland can compete with the money on offer elsewhere.
We must focus on winning as our primary objective. Those that can't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And 2003 in this country, in the America's Cup, there was a couple of the guys of the team were involved there, and it's before my time, but it was a disaster. It was a disaster. And we have no interest in repeating that sort of disaster with an underfunded, hobbled team.
The government and Auckland Council offered just shy of $100 million to keep the cup here, but that was knocked back by Team New Zealand earlier this year. Former world champion sailor and ex-Team New Zealand member Mark Orams says he was preparing for the worst today. But the delay gives him reason to be optimistic. Orams wants Team New Zealand to thoroughly consider keeping the cup in Auckland and says the alternative of chasing international cash in cities where sailing conditions aren't always world class is risky.
Certainly the Middle East is not ideal from a sailing perspective, and it's not just that. There are all kinds of issues associated with security and concerns about particular challengers who might be uncomfortable going there. Those kinds of things need to be considered as well. There are risks involved in all the choices, actually. So Barcelona is a great place to sail, but vagaries of conditions there in the Mediterranean, environmental issues, and Ireland, similarly. It can be a great place to sail, but it's cold, and it's not sort of what you would call a premier sailing location globally, whereas Auckland absolutely is.
Orams knows what it's like to lose the America's Cup and can sympathise that Dalton is under pressure to make the right call on the next venue.
If he makes a decision to compromise the competitive nature of Team New Zealand in order to host it here in Auckland, and then we lose and the cup goes offshore, it'll be his head on the chopping block.
Earlier this year, a Courier Market Research survey found 72% of New Zealanders wanted the defence to be held here. And today, in Mission Bay, their sentiment remains much the same.
But it's just a good Kiwi thing to have,
It was great, for the economy, not just Auckland, but the whole of New Zealand, because it all filters down what the America's Cup brings to New Zealand. I'd love to see it back.
Yeah, we're interested to see if he can actually get it through. I know a lot of it does come down to money. But I know we've thrown a lot of money into it, so it'd be nice to get kind of a little bit of a return on it. And I know that maybe for COVID we would have, it would have been a great, it would have been massive.
So if it goes overseas, they don't have the support of the country because you and I couldn't go. So at least here, and last year when we had it, or this year, it was just fabulous.
Grant Dalton won't confirm when the venue announcement will be made, so it could be weeks or months before it's known where in the world the next America's Cup will be sailed.
Well, Auckland businessman Mark Dunphy explains his plan to keep the America's Cup regatta on home turf.
We have come with a proposal to fund the deficit. So we're advised that they had $80 million that they needed to find to defend the Cup in New Zealand, and we understand the components of that, and so we've come with a proposal that will see them have the money and defend the Cup here.
So when you say we, who's keen to chuck some money in the pot?
I think there'll be a lot of people keen to chuck the money in the pot.
So have you got guaranteed funders?
Well, guaranteed funders is the part of the funding today is spoken for, and the balance will be.
So you reckon you can raise what's needed?
Absolutely.
And what's in it for you?
I want the same as every Kiwi, I think. We really want to see this Cup defended in New Zealand. We've been sailing for the America's Cup for a very long time now, since '87. And there's been a massive amount of capital invested in it, all sorts of capital, and obviously the folding type from the government and lots of private sector money. I think we've invested to date $1.5 billion in this, and we've had kids with their piggy banks and penny jars and all wearing red socks and merch, and we're all right behind this team. You know, they're our team. We're emotionally behind them, and you know, we really just want to see them win. So I'm one of those Kiwis, and I think we all are, really.
So people who are prepared to kick in for funding, is it a business arrangement? Would they expect a return? Is it a donation? Is it sponsorship?
It's a donation.
Okay.
It's a donation, so they just want to see the right thing happen, and you know, there have been questions about who these people are, but typically, in my experience, people who are giving money away, most people don't want to be known. I mean, some people want to be, but by and large, they don't. And it's my job to help with that. So,
and would you be happy to press ahead with this arrangement with Grant Dalton still at the helm, so to speak?
Yes, absolutely. Look, I really like what the team has done, and I think we all do. We all respect the fantastic efforts that we've seen on the water, and so we're happy to support this team. And I'm much more interested, I have to say, in seeing the team go on and defend successfully, not just this time, but again and again and again, because we are the most successful team in the modern era of this Cup. It's a fantastic asset for New Zealand. We, you know, when you think of those lovely images of the Gulf with all the boats out there, and what a fantastic showcase for New Zealand. We show off our natural beauty, our wonderful technology, our sporting skills, you know. And it's paradise. And I think the America's Cup is absolutely one of the best ways we have of showing this to the world, and it has very significant value implications for us as a country, and of course for us as a team. And I think I kind of think of New Zealand as the crew of 5 million when it comes to the America's Cup, because we're all behind them, and it's just a terrible thought that it might not. When in fact, it's an unacceptable thought, really, that.
Mark, can you compete with these international offers?
Absolutely. And I'd take you back to when the first challenge was made by Sir Michael Fay and David Richwart. I was around the table as one of their partners at the time. And the calls were, you know, did we have the technological skills to design the boat and build a boat, and could we crew it, could we win? And the answer to that was yes. And then the second question was, would we be able to do that against, you know, the biggest players in the world? And the answer to that was yes. And it was a difficult decision. It was a gutsy decision, but it was right. And it's really right again now. And I think people probably don't appreciate that whilst we might have been in 10 regattas, and sometimes as defender and sometimes as challenger, there wouldn't be one occasion in the past when there would have been a suggestion that should we win or retain the Cup, that we would defend it offshore, because it was easier to raise the money. And I think that's really a loathsome proposition.
Mark Dunphy. A small college just south of Auckland's border is stretched to the max because several staff can't get COVID-19 travel exemptions. Among those locked out of Level 2 land is the principal of Te Kauwhata College, who says her pleas have been met with a wall of contradictory government advice. Our reporter Nick Trubridge has the story.
Te Kauwhata College principal Deborah Honig has a saying.
A school is a ship, and the principal's job is to steer the ship.
The problem? Well, right now she's trying to steer the Te Kauwhata College ship over Zoom. The college in rural North Waikato is at Level 2. Its principal is stuck in Level 4 in rural Awhitu, about 90 kilometres southwest of Auckland's CBD. And Miss Honig's not alone. 5 other Te Kauwhata College staff and several students are also under instruction to stay away from the classroom.
And yet, contradictorily, there are teachers in TK Primary School and the principal of the Te Kauwhata Primary School, which is like just across the road, who have got exemptions. So it's this inconsistency that's really getting me angry.
While she and her teachers have been denied an exemption, some of her students are also on the wrong side of the border.
For those parents I've advised them to apply for their own personal exemptions because clearly nobody is listening to the principal. So some of them have applied for exemptions. They've got letters back from MBI saying they do not need an exemption, they can go to school.
And the confusion doesn't end there.
But then the primary school principal contacts the ministry, and the ministry tells them, oh, no, because we've got primary school students in the same situation, and some of these are siblings. The ministry tells the primary school principal, oh, no, you cannot go to school if you're in level 4. Absolutely not. And the schools are going to be liable if something happens, if we have an outbreak or whatever.
It's a tangled web of mixed messaging that has Mrs. Honeck losing sleep.
It's absolutely crazy, and I'm literally in the point where I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm saying to myself, I'm just going to tell these people to go to school. If I do that and we have any kind of slip across the border and an outbreak in Te Kaupata or in the Waikato somewhere, obviously we're going to be held accountable. And so that's the dilemma of the situation we're in.
Now, this may not seem like a big issue, but Te Kaupata is a small rural school with just over 500 students. Being down 5 teachers and a principal has a big impact on students.
Teachers are trying to teach online and in physical presence at the same time, and you've got 5 teachers down and we have no relievers. So everybody's covering for everybody. My DP is, she's seriously stressed, and I'm trying to support from a distance via Zoom.
Chris Mannion and his family live on the northern side of Glenmurray Road. His family's at level 4, with neighbours across the road at level 2. Despite being closer to Hamilton CBD than Auckland's, Mr. Mannion's kids remain locked down inside, unable to attend classes with their mates. We spoke to his daughter Ruby about the impending situation last month.
I miss my friends when I can't see them. I don't like that the neighbours' kids can catch a bus from the end of our driveway because it's unsafe for them to catch it from theirs, and we still can't go down to the end of our driveway because that's crossing the border. That feels a little stupid to me.
That was before the rest of New Zealand went to level 2, but today Chris Mannion confirmed his kids are indeed still schooling at home.
2 of them want to go off to university next year, so being at school at the moment is quite important for them both, you know.
Meanwhile, Deborah Honeck acknowledges the government and its agencies have a lot on their plate, but says decisions need to be consistent.
And it does just seem to me that if you apply for an exemption, it just depends who is looking at you're doing the ticking boxing exercise at the other end, because some of them are given and some of them are not. And I really challenge that truck drivers can get an exemption to go across every day and do a saliva test, but a school principal and school teachers can't, and school students are given those mixed messages that I've described before.
A principal desperate to get back to the helm of the ship.
The Ministry of Health has sent us a statement saying it's taking a highly cautious approach to exemption requests. A spokeswoman says just 213 exemptions have been approved out of nearly 4,800 requests. She says exemptions for personal travel are only granted in exceptional circumstances on a case-by-case basis and when consistent with the public health response to COVID-19. The Ministry of Health told us questions about work-related travel should be directed to MB. However, when we asked MB those questions, it referred us to the Ministry of Health. Kia ora e te iwi e haere ake nei I a Checkpoint. We'll have more on the Timaru homicide investigation. Why are COVID vaccination rates so low among those using mental health and addiction services? And from next month, communities can apply to sponsor refugee families again. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. If you're in Auckland, let us know what you're up to this weekend. An extra lap around the block, maybe. Time for the headlines now. Ko Sarah Anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. RNZ News headlines. Ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. The bodies of 3 children killed at a home in Timaru have been removed from the property. Police arrived at the house in the suburb of Parkside at about 10 o'clock last night to find the bodies of the siblings, a 7-year-old and 3-year-old twins. They say the family had only left MIQ a week ago after arriving in the country from South Africa. Members of the South African community have left flowers and a soft toy near the home, some with messages in support. 2 of the 11 new COVID-19 cases reported today were identified after they turned up at Auckland's Middlemore Hospital last night. They were unwell and taken to hospital by a family member. The Delta outbreak has meanwhile broken the 1,000 case mark, of which 549 have recovered. A truck driver who was tested positive for COVID-19 has been transferred to quarantine. The essential worker was tested after a household member was identified as a contact. Health officials say he made deliveries at supermarkets in Auckland, Bay of Plenty and Waikato. The Travel Agents Association is optimistic vaccination levels will be high enough in 8 weeks for the Trans-Tasman bubble to reopen. The government has extended its suspension until at least November. Border infringement notices have been given to an Aucklander who claimed to be driving north to feed stock, but returned with bags of shopping. And 3 young men have also been charged after they headed to Ohakune. Police searching for missing King Country man Thomas Phillips want to know the whereabouts of 2 motorbikes he owned. Mr Phillips and his 3 children have not been seen since last Saturday at Marukopa. Better weather today has allowed an air search. And finally, Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison says China would have no justification to retaliate against Australia for signing a security pact with the United States and United Kingdom. The alliance would help Australia acquire at least 8 nuclear-powered submarines. Beijing says the plan is extremely irresponsible. Those are your headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Kia ora rā, e ho nau mai, hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nai anei, ko Nona Peltier, to talk business. Now, Nona, China has applied to join the CPTPP. I mean, how many letters are there in this acronym? What is it, and what does it mean for New Zealanders?
Well, there's 5 letters, and they stand for Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's right, the CPTPP, and it's the world's biggest free trade agreement. So, you know, it has the status of 5 big letters to go along with that. And what does it mean? Well, they've applied to join, and that means that China, by applying, it's also indicating that it's willing to play by the rules of the rest of the trade parties in the pact. Now, it's 11 countries that are in the agreement, and that includes New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Chile, Japan. Actually, it accounts for about 13% of the world's economy. And so this is an important step for China because the rules that they would have to play by are about, you know, free trade. So that could open up a lot of opportunities for others in the pact if China does in fact succeed in being accepted.
And let's talk about manufacturing activity. Not sort of, well, unsurprisingly, it's slumped since the lockdown. What are the numbers looking like?
They're looking like they're in free fall. So we have expansion indicates what is 50 is the number for expansion. Anything below is contraction. And at the moment, it's at 40.1 points. And that's down from what we had previously, and 40.1 indicates that the industry is contracting. So what does that mean? Well, they're not making as many goods as you would expect. Orders are down and so forth. And that productivity is unlikely to be picked up again until after the lockdown in Auckland, I guess, eases to the point where people can actually go back to that kind of manufacturing activity. One of the bright spots, though, is the employment. It's at 54.5, which is above the average, and it indicates that manufacturers are hanging on to their staff. So that's a positive. However, to use the words of a senior economist with B&Z, Doug Steele, he said it's a pretty ugly result. And so let's watch out for what happens next, but certainly it's not going to be a good time for manufacturing.
Are the numbers on the market any better?
Oh my goodness, are they ever? In fact, we've had the largest single session rise in a month. We rose 1.2%. That's a 155-point gain to 13,235, and that reflects a strong gain in Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. It rose 3% or $1 up to $32.40, and that certainly made the difference there in the index. And the dollar is steady after losing a little bit of ground overnight against the U.S. dollar. It's at 70.8 U.S. cents, 96.9 Australian, and 51.3 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite. Have a great weekend. Nona Peltier with our business news. Police searching for missing King Country man Thomas Phillips are keen to know the whereabouts of 2 motorbikes he owned. Mr Phillips and his 3 children haven't been seen since last Saturday at Marukopa on the west coast of the North Island. Better weather conditions today has meant an aerial search could go ahead, and ground searches are also continuing. Andrew McRae reports.
Police want information on a 2004 Honda XR400 and a 2019 Honda XR F50. They say the appeal for specific information on the bikes may lead to speculation they could be involved in some way, but it's just one line of inquiry. They also want anyone finding items, including clothing along the coastline, to contact them. Surf lifesaving crews from Raglan, Omanu Beach and Taranaki have been out on jet skis and inflatables, taking advantage of calmer conditions. Surf Lifesaving New Zealand's Search and Rescue Manager Alan Mundy says crews have been searching from Marukopa to about 8 kilometres north.
The guys have been and girls have been really, really thorough, and that's what we want to do. We want to only do it once. So it's been a pretty full-on task. They've been, getting out of the IOBs in some cases, swimming into land to clear stuff. But we know we've been able to do that today, and that'll go into the search planning to look at what the police decide to do next.
He says crews are concentrating close to the shore, where the visibility from the air isn't so good and land-based searchers can't access.
We've been here for 3 days. We've been on the water for those 3 days. So our crews need some time to refresh. So we're actually going to head home, have a bit of time to recoup, and then if we're needed by the police, they will give us the nod and we'll be back.
MetOcean Solutions, a company based in Raglan, does modelling on tides and currents. Its general manager, Brett Beamsley, says last weekend when the family went missing, waves were between 3 and 4 metres high.
Pretty large and rugged in a short period and probably quite dangerous on some of those exposed coastal areas.
Dr Beamsley says it's hard to determine in which direction anyone in the water would have gone.
Probably more towards the south, heading towards the southwest to start with those residual currents, and then probably kind of at about now when there's a slightly more settled conditions, those currents are looking at bringing any object that was further offshore outside of the surf zone, look at bringing that in a little bit closer into shore.
Waitomo District Mayor John Robertson says as time goes on, the community is thinking there's a possibility the family have been taken by the sea.
Perhaps in the first 3 or 4 days we felt that because Thomas was very familiar with the area, a good bushman, that the possibility of him and the children being camping somewhere was real. So that's not ruled out, but clearly as the days go on, it gets harder.
He says people are still holding on to hope, and any decision to end the search will be made by the police.
It feels a bit early days to me. We've had pretty atrocious weather in the early part of this. So, for the weather to calm down, it makes the search easier.
The Phillips family has again asked for privacy, saying while they appreciate public interest and concern, they want to concentrate on the search efforts for Tom and the children.
There's concern the vaccine rollout isn't reaching people using mental health and addiction services who were prioritised by the government for early access to the Pfizer jab. Right now, 37% of the eligible population is fully vaccinated, compared to just 19% of people using mental health and addiction services. And 71% of the eligible population is partially vaccinated versus 43% of this priority group. Well, joining me now is Tammy Allen, Chief Experience Officer at the advocacy group Changing Minds. Kia ora, Tammy. Why do you think the take-up is so low in this group?
I think originally there was some awareness that
from health professionals outside of those direct mental health services that they weren't really that aware of the mental health issues being part of Group 3, and so their advocacy and their reach out to those groups were probably a little bit slow on the uptake. But it is good to see that 42% of our whai ora have received at least their first dose, and I think that's due to the really real efforts of some of our mental health services reaching out and using that manaakitanga to really understand and validate some of the concerns that people have.
And what are some of the concerns that they have?
Look, I think it's fair to say that people with mental health and addiction issues have not always been treated that fairly when it comes to medication and coercion in our past. So there's some real nervous trepidation and timid responses about whether this is another part of coercion or what it actually means for them. And also, of course, there are a lot of people on some pretty strong medications, and there's some trepidation about what that might mean in terms of how it might contraindicate. So just being able to talk to people through some of the things that might be scary to them and give them enough information, but really understand where those fears might be coming from based on their history.
So, Tammy, when you talk about coercion, are you meaning that some people may have had medication forced on them or ordered on them, and they want to know that they're making a decision themselves about the vaccine?
Absolutely, yeah. Look, I mean, the last results we had were about 2019, but about 5% of our population that are in mental health services have been at some place or other under the Act. And part of that might be that they would have had to have needles or things like that as part of their mental health medication that they might not have agreed with or liked. And that process itself can be quite frightening for people. So needles can be equated as needles for a lot of people, and separating that out from something that might be beneficial to their physical health, like the vaccination, and things that might have been coercive of the past is a really important conversation to be having really patiently with people.
So why is this group a priority? What makes them a priority? And why should they be a focus in terms of getting them through and getting them vaccinated?
Well, we've got really terrifying statistics that people with mental health and addiction issues die 20 to 25% younger than the rest of our population, and that's not because of our mental health and addiction issues, but it's because of physical health concerns that can be overshadowed by our medical system just by not really seeing things before it's too late. So there is definitely a growing awareness of people in mental health and addiction to look out for some of those physical health concerns, but it's still largely an invisible health inequity in our society.
Tammy, are the decision makers, the people behind the vaccine rollout, are they talking to the right people? I mean, are they talking to you and groups like yours about how to access this particular group and encourage them to get vaccinated?
Yes, they are. In fact, Changing Minds with a lot of our partners put together a resource based on the fears and questions of our tangata whai ora out there, and we've got that on our website. So if people are worried about contraindications or what that means for their whānau, they can have a look at that resource. We've also really got a great service run by Balance called Ngā Tahi Ora, which is where people, if they want a little bit of support, can reach out to them for free, and a peer support worker can either go with you or give you some support around understanding the vaccine and what that means. And look, we've heard some amazing stories, even today when I reached out about this interview to our NGO services, about just what they're doing to make sure they're sitting down and spending time with people to understand and giving them the support they need without forcing them or making them feel pressured, but actually giving them the information and giving them the patience that they need to make this really informed decision.
Tammy, before you head off, that information you said is on your website. What's the website if people want to check it out? changingminds.org.nz. Lovely to talk to you, Tammy. That is Tammy Allen, who's the Chief Experience Officer at the advocacy group Changing Minds. It is 10 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. He muriaki in a Pita Pita kōrero. After the news at 6, we're at the scene of the Timaru homicide investigation. New South Wales recorded another 1,200 new cases and 12 deaths today, 3 of whom were fully vaccinated. As a country, Australia is moving closer to hitting vaccination targets, and states will begin trialling home quarantine for international arrivals. New South Wales will start within weeks, and those doing it will be monitored by New South Wales Health and Police. The ABC's Jade McMillan reports.
When his wife fell pregnant with their second child, Anton Manenko and his family decided to move home from London to Australia. His wife made it to Canberra with their young son, but his plans to follow several months later fell through because of flight cancellations. Racing to get home before the due date, the New Zealand citizen and Australian permanent resident tried to travel through Auckland, but was halfway through his quarantine there when so-called green zone flights between the two countries were paused.
I'm still stuck here. My daughter was born on the 2nd of September. And so my wife is in Australia right now. She's in Canberra. She's looking after a newborn and my 3-year-old son. And I'm still stuck in Auckland, New Zealand, with no prospect of getting home just yet.
With the Trans-Tasman travel bubble still suspended, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has revealed there are around 400 Australians registered as wanting to return from New Zealand. Anton Manenko is growing increasingly frustrated and anxious.
This is the time that I will never get back, right? It's those moments that are now missed forever. Obviously, I can't compare to what my wife has gone through from a physical, mental and emotional level. For me personally, it's been a very, very emotional, very heavy time.
Around the world, there are more than 40,000 Australians trying to get home within the international flight caps. The Prime Minister has assured those who are fully vaccinated that home quarantine will become an option. Several states, such as Western Australia, are already using mobile phone apps to manage home quarantine for interstate travellers, like Shelley Fellows, who recently returned from New South Wales.
Every day the app sends you multiple messages throughout the day. The phone will basically beep and buzz and vibrate until you pick it up, and you have 4 minutes to take a selfie, and there's some sort of facial recognition process that goes on.
Some experts are alarmed at the use of that sort of technology, but Shelley Fellows isn't too bothered.
I did feel at times that it was a little bit invasive, but I understand that there are people who are doing the wrong thing.
Epidemiologist Professor Catherine Bennett believes home quarantine for vaccinated overseas travellers is an important step forward, and she expects it will become more common soon.
I actually see this coming along quite quickly. Everybody will have, access to vaccines by October when we hit those targets, which is probably going to be early October at the rate we're going, around the 80% mark. If we've got these outbreaks under control, then I think it could happen at that point, certainly in the states that already have the virus in the community.
And this brings us a full circle back to the bubble, which has been put on hold, the Trans-Tasman bubble, for another 2 months by the government. There's going to be some red flights back. People have to book into MIQ, and those flights don't come from all states, which obviously causes a problem for some people stuck in other areas. This listener says, yes, we need the bubble. I don't care about granny. We have to save the airline travel industry. Another listener says, Queensland, South Australia, Northern Territory, WA and Tasmania have 0 cases, and yet we can't travel. Ridiculous overreaction. I feel so sorry for Kiwis unable to get home in these states. Lindsay's got in touch to say the elderly couple stuck in Australia, I have a lot of sympathy, but we were told flyer beware. This person says those stuck in Oz were told repeatedly that getting stuck there was possible, and it was on them to manage that. Sick of the moaning, they say. Another one says simply flyer beware, ! Oh, this listener is hopeful. I think open up to safe states in time for Christmas, they say. And another person reckons Australian regional borders are rather leaky, I think it says. New Zealand needs to be 85% double jabbed from 12 years up before we open to Australia. Thanks for all your feedback. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The National Party says the Auckland terrorists' immigration history is a glaring omission in the government review of the Newlands supermarket attack. Charities say huge gaps that exist in services offered to asylum seekers also need reviewing. Jill Bonnet reports.
It's 2 weeks since Ahmed Samsudeen stabbed shoppers at a supermarket in New Lynn. The government announced yesterday a review into the actions of police, corrections and the SIS in the 4 years since Samsudeen was first arrested, but not into what happened in the 6 years after he first arrived from Sri Lanka. The opposition immigration spokesperson Erica Stanford says that will leave many unanswered questions.
The biggest piece of the jigsaw was completely left out. So immigration really is the key to finding out, why this guy was still in New Zealand and why he wasn't deported.
She wants to know how fraud in Samsudeen's original claim was missed, why his deportation appeal was delayed, and if he could have been detained in the meantime. She says the tribunal which granted his refugee status made it clear how damaged he was, suffering from severe depression and post-traumatic stress disorder.
There needs to be questions asked as to what sort of wraparound services we then put around him to keep him safe and also our community safe.
Charities say many asylum seekers are left anxious, vulnerable and traumatised by their experience in New Zealand. It was 2 years before Samsudeen was accepted as a refugee. The Asylum Seekers Support Trust's General Manager, Tim Maurice, says it's not clear if he got any support at all.
They've come here looking for a safe place to live and they get granted, the permission to stay here, but then they're expecting to be able to get a job, get a house, resettle with their family and stuff, and there's just blockages all the time for that to happen.
He says 500 people a year make their own way here and claim asylum after arriving, and about half are accepted as so-called convention refugees. It's a different picture for the 1,500 refugees who arrive via the United Nations through an annual quota. Quota refugees receive support at the Maunganui Refugee Resettlement Centre for 6 weeks, are provided with housing and get ongoing support for up to 2 years. He wants asylum seekers and convention refugees to be included in a government strategy covering settlement services and for an independent review of that policy.
A little bit of money spent early on to help people resettle will have huge outcomes for these people and for our country. We want people engaging in our communities, contributing to our communities. It's very hard to do that when you're stuck at home, no English skills and no one able to provide you with the education to be able to increase your English skills or to be able to get a job.
Quota refugees automatically have permanent residence on arrival, with rights such as state health care. Refugees as Survivors Chief Executive Sharon Ward says asylum seekers have the same needs. Her team of 40 provide treatment for mental illness such as post-traumatic stress disorder. She says some are referred to mental health services by a lawyer or doctor, but others slip through the net entirely.
They are very needy and very poverty-stricken. The process is definitely not easy. The waiting times and the access they have and the lack of facilities and the lack of benefits that they get is appalling.
Since the terrorist attack, Labour MP Ibrahim Omar told Parliament change is needed.
We identified huge hole and the gap in the system, the way the asylum seekers are being supported. We've heard that this guy had a severe mental health issue, and now in our system, asylum seekers get very little support around the mental health and other support.
The Asylum Seeker Equality Project hasn't been able to pinpoint the reason quota and convention refugees are treated differently.
All right, your feedback now. This lot on the America's Cup, right? We did an interview with Mark Dunphy, who's the Auckland businessman who's on a quest to keep the America's Cup regatta here in Auckland, and he's put forward a proposal. He reckons everyone's behind the cup. You guys don't agree. This person says all Kiwis are behind the America's Cup. 2 question marks. Speak for yourself. Spend the dollars on something important like child poverty. Robin says, hey Lisa, we aren't all behind the boat race. Let them raise the money if they want to have it. As a taxpayer, I don't want my taxes going to this race. And Jenny says, I'm not in the sailing team of 5 million, not all in capital letters. Thanks for that, Jenny. On the truck driver who has COVID, Simon from Auckland says, why are not all essential workers who are crossing the Auckland border required to be fully vaccinated? We have similar vaccination requirements for aircrew, customs and MIQ workers. Surely such workers, such as truckers, should also be mandated to be fully vaccinated before they are allowed to cross the border.
Ahiahi Māori, RNZ News at 6, ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. The bodies of 3 children killed at home in Timaru have been taken from the property. Police found the bodies of the siblings, 3-year-old twins and a 7-year-old, when they arrived at the home last night. This afternoon, they were taken away in a hearse. Police say the family had only left MIQ a week ago after arriving in the country from South Africa. Members of the South African community have left flowers and a soft toy near the home, some with messages of support. Jade Wali and her husband heard crying and sobbing from next door before emergency services arrived last night.
I really just hope the person that done this is forthcoming and they can at least try and piece together the why. They will never understand, what is happening. And as a community, everyone in Timaru is already in shock and grieving because of the events that have unfolded in the last few months.
Jade Whaley says the house was rented out to South Canterbury DHB employees. A truck driver who was tested positive for COVID-19 has been transferred to quarantine. The essential worker was tested after a household member was identified as a contact. Health officials say he made deliveries at supermarkets in Auckland, Bay of Plenty and Waikato, but wore a mask and distanced. He was one of 11 community cases reported today, all in Tāmaki Makaurau. The government will be keeping the school holidays in 2 weeks' time, as they are, saying it would be more disruptive to move them. The school break will go ahead from October 2nd, meaning Auckland parents still in lockdown could be facing at least 9 weeks at home with their children. Education Minister Chris Hipkins says he wanted to give people certainty.
There is some difficulty with shifting school holidays from a legal standpoint, for starters. If we were to shift the school holidays at this point, schools in Auckland would have the choice as to whether or not they went with the new school holidays or the existing school holidays. And that could create even more disruption in Auckland, with some schools opting in and some schools opting out.
Chris Hipkins says teachers have been working through lockdown and need some time to prepare and mark assignments. However, he acknowledges it will be difficult for parents. The Marukopa community in Waikato is still hoping for the safe return of a man and his 3 children nearly a week on from their disappearance. Thomas Phillips and his 3 children aged 5, 6 and 8 have not been seen since last Saturday. Raniera Winikere has been working with the local community to support the search effort.
And as each day passes, stress levels increase, but we are a very resilient people. And we keep the faith. There is always hope that the safe return of our whānau will take place.
Raniera Winikere performed a karakia for lifeguards today to keep up the morale of searchers. The operation will resume tomorrow morning with a ground-based coastline search. Charities say refugees are left anxious, vulnerable and traumatised by their experience of claiming asylum in Aotearoa. The Labour MP and former refugee Ibrahim Omar says work is being done to bridge huge gaps in the services offered to asylum seekers compared to refugees who arrive through the annual quota. The Asylum Seekers Support Trust General Manager Tim Morris wants an independent review of the country's refugee settlement strategy. He says some people struggle alone with no English skills, home or job, while quota refugees are offered a wraparound service. The case of the provincial rugby players who wrongly obtained exemptions to travel out of Auckland's Level 4 lockdown is now in the hands of the police. New Zealand Rugby said yesterday it had removed 6 players from provincial squads and ordered them back to Auckland after being alerted to errors in the union's application for a COVID-19 travel exemption. Players had travelled from Auckland to Wellington, Hawke's Bay, Manawatu, Bay of Plenty and Northland after 5 unions applied for exemptions. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment confirmed to Checkpoint the case has now been referred to police. It would not comment further. The hole in the ozone that forms every year over the South Pole is now larger than Antarctica, according to scientists. The ozone and its depletion forms a hole over the Antarctic during August to October. It typically reaches its largest size around mid-September to mid-October, but after growing considerably in the past week, the hole is now larger than 75% of previous year's ozone holes at the same stage of the season since 1979. Moving now into sports news, Argentina may have failed to score in their last two encounters against the All Blacks, but skipper Adi Savea believes they won't have things so easy in this weekend's test in Brisbane. The All Blacks thumped the Pumas 39-0 on the Gold Coast last weekend, and coach Ian Foster has made 11 changes to his starting side. Savea returns to lead the side, having recovered from a head injury, and he's warning that the All Blacks cannot get complacent.
If we turn up thinking the same performance we did last week will be enough, then we're kidding ourselves. So we know the RG boys, they're wounded beasts and they're dangerous right now. So if we don't turn up, it could be a long day.
The All Blacks top the Rugby Championship standings with the Springboks, who play the Wallabies tomorrow night, second. New Zealand are claiming underdog status ahead of this weekend's Davis Cup tennis tie against Korea in the United States, despite suggesting their opponents are struggling. Olympic bronze medalist Marcus Daniel and Michael Venus, along with veteran Ruben Statham and first-timers Finn Reynolds and Isaac Beecroft, make up the New Zealand contingent. The side's captain, Christophe Lambert, says the Korea team is starting to show cracks.
Even if we are not the best team on paper, psychologically we are pretty strong. I look at the Korean team since the beginning of the week. They are starting to be tired and grumpy by missing, so it's a good sign for us.
The tie was due to be played in New Zealand but moved to Rhode Island because of COVID restrictions here. And that is your news and sport.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life celebrates spring with a visit to one of the country's largest daffodil farms, if that's what you call a place where they grow daffodils. Actress Antonia Preble selects the mixtape Moana and the Tribe of this week's Friday Night Live act. And because New Zealand abolished flogging as a punishment on this day in 1941, we have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to whips and chains on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, on air, online and on demand. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Aharoa Saturday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, mostly cloudy with isolated showers today and fine tomorrow. Waikato to Kapiti Coast, including the Central High Country and Bay of Plenty, mostly cloudy today with isolated showers. Fine spells increasing tomorrow, but isolated afternoon showers for Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers easing tomorrow evening, strong southeasterlies easing tonight. Wellington and Wairarapa will see occasional showers becoming isolated tomorrow and clearing to fine in Wellington. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland will be fine today apart from cloud in Bulla, showers developing tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury will be mostly cloudy overnight with a few showers in Canterbury and the Kaikoura coast. Mostly fine tomorrow. Otago and Southland will be fine apart from coastal cloud. Isolated showers tomorrow afternoon or evening, mainly in Southland or Clutha. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Aharoa Saturday. It's 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Sarah. No mai, hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The family at the centre of a homicide in Timaru had only left MIQ a week ago after arriving in the country from South Africa. 3 young children were found dead after police were called to the property in the suburb of Parkside late last night. It's understood at least one of the parents worked as a doctor at nearby Timaru Hospital, just 200 metres from the house. Late this afternoon, a hearse carrying all 3 bodies left the home. Our reporter Tim Brown is in Timaru.
Lisa, a team of police investigators and ESR staff are here trying to piece together what happened last night. 3 children were found dead at the scene by police officers when they arrived just after 10 o'clock, twins aged 3 and a 7-year-old. Neighbours say that there was some noises out of the property before police arrived. They say they heard what sounded like crying. Here's what Detective Inspector Scott Anderson had to say.
Police can now confirm that the deceased were children and siblings, 2 aged 3 years and 1 aged 7. Emergency services also located a woman at the property and she was transported to Timaru Hospital and is in a stable condition.
And Tim, what else do we know about the family?
The family only arrived in the South Canterbury town about a week ago. They've obviously just got out of MIQ from South Africa. We don't know exactly who the identity is at the moment. The police are keeping those details close to their chest. However, there have been a number of staff from the hospital coming and going from houses on this street during today that I've witnessed. Police have said that a woman is also in the hospital. She was found injured at the scene last night. I've seen some senior police staff go in there before. Obviously, this tragedy has hit the community hard. They had the deaths of 5 teenagers in a car crash just north of Timaru last month. Here's what Superintendent John Price had to say.
My message to the people on Timaru is you live in a fantastic, safe place. It's unfortunate these events have occurred in a short period of time. We want to provide our reassurance that we're doing everything we can as police and with the wider partner agencies to ensure that Timaru will be safe and feel safe.
That's Canterbury District Commander Superintendent John Price speaking from Timaru this afternoon. And an update on our earlier story now regarding the NPC rugby unions who wrongly obtained exemptions for players to travel out of Auckland's Level 4 lockdown. Police have just confirmed to Checkpoint that they are investigating. The matter was referred to them by MB, which assesses the exemption applications. New Zealand Rugby revealed yesterday that it had removed 6 players from provincial squads and ordered them back to Auckland after being alerted to errors in their applications for COVID-19 travel exemptions. But NZR has declined to say exactly what the errors were. The players had travelled from Auckland to Wellington, Hawke's Bay, Manawatu, Bay of Plenty and Northland after 5 unions applied for exemptions. The government has decided not to bring forward the school holidays despite calls from exhausted parents and the opposition. The school break will go ahead from October the 2nd, meaning Auckland parents are facing at least 9 weeks at home with their children. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Today marks 1 month since Auckland was plunged into lockdown, 1 month with schools shut.
It's getting a bit boring now that we've been in lockdown for a very long time.
Yes, it's boring for the children and tiresome for the parents.
Homeschooling is not a great experience for anyone.
I am worried. We're into week 5 and they've missed 5 weeks of school.
5 weeks looks set to become 6 and then 7, with schools for the most part remaining shut under Level 3. The school holidays then start from October the 2nd, a 2-week break. That makes 9 weeks in total. 9 weeks with the kids at home.
We've been at home a lot and it's getting a bit boring.
Yeah. We want to go to the holidays. It's been a long term already.
The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, did consider bringing the holidays forward so children could return to the classroom sooner. But today, he nixed the idea.
It is a difficult decision. When I considered all of the different factors here, the most logical decision was to keep the school holidays as they are.
Among the factors, the teaching and family plans already in place, the disruption a last-minute shift would cause, and the overwhelming resistance from schools. Vaccination rates were also considered. This will allow students older than 12 more time to be vaccinated before returning.
I acknowledge that it's difficult. Unfortunately, shifting the school holidays isn't ultimately the solution for that.
But the National Party says it could have been. Its education spokesperson, Paul Goldsmith, thinks the government made the wrong call.
There's no perfect solution to any of this. It's all messy. I would have preferred that we had the holidays over the next 2 weeks and the kids could have been back in class, hopefully 2 weeks down the line.
That's not what teachers and principals wanted, though. They're thrilled to be sticking with the status quo. The Auckland Primary Principals Association says schools would have struggled with a sudden change in plans. Its president, Stephen Lethbridge, says schools are here to support struggling families.
The majority of teachers that are in online learning and working all day are also parents as well. So we get that. And what we say to parents is, if you are having trouble, try not to sweat the small stuff. Talk to your schools about things.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Some salient advice, staring down another 4 weeks at home with the kids.
It's 6:15. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A pet shelter in Auckland for animals from abusive households says demand for their service has tripled since lockdown began. Since opening just 2 months ago, Pet Refuge is getting more and more requests from people whose bubbles are unsafe. And as our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi found out, running the operation in Level 4 comes with its challenges.
It's a safe place for cats, dogs and even rabbits from all over the country to go when home isn't. Pet Refuge was built to help victims who delay leaving abusive relationships because they're worried about their pets. It provides accommodation for their animals until they find a safe place to reunite. CEO Julie Chapman says they get requests from all over the country, but recently things have been getting worse, particularly in Auckland.
We've done 2 police emergency call-outs in the last few weeks. They're coming through Women's Refuge, Shine and self-referrals as well. We do have a crisis line that people can call.
And level 4 restrictions are making it difficult.
Pets during level 4 can't be reunited with their owners who've found safety because they're not able to move into their new accommodation.
Nationwide pickups will resume when alert levels allow. Until then, they've had to get help to transport pets.
Basically, once people get in touch with us, we're able to work on a sort of individual bespoke plan to be able to get the pets to us, and we're able to work with Jet Pets who have exemption to be able to transport pets from out of Auckland to the border and then do handovers.
Despite these setbacks, there's an important reason they're not slowing down.
We know that 53% of women will delay leaving a violent relationship out of fear for their pet's safety, but encouragingly 73% would leave sooner knowing that there was somewhere for their pet to go.
This woman, who can't be named for privacy reasons, sent her 2 pets to Pet Refuge. Her comments have been voiced.
I was in a bad relationship and I was constantly, desperately trying to find a way to get my pets somewhere safe. I tried to leave around 10 times, but one of the main reasons I couldn't was my pets. I didn't want my ex to have them. He was always threatening to give them away. They're a really big part of my life and my coping. But things got worse and I knew I had to leave for me and my baby girl. I didn't want her seeing me cry and having regular breakdowns. I wanted to bring her up in a home that was happy. And I could see the yelling was affecting the dog too. I can't wait to find a house for us all so we can be together in safety.
Shelter manager Louise Morley says the condition of animals on arrival is often fragile.
So quite a few of them have actually come in very hand shy, and when we use squeegees and things like that, picking up the feces, they're quite shy of the equipment we're using, so we have to be mindful of that. Some of them can be underweight, so we just monitor that and we make sure we're giving them the right nutrition.
While they may only have the pets for a few weeks, they fill it with love.
We work on their calm time. We play music during the day for them. We take them into the office. We do loads of enrichment with them and training and provide a nice routine for them.
The toys, treats, games and warm beds are testament to that. Despite the space constraints, the Pet Refuge is urging anyone in an abusive situation to reach out for help.
And we'll put the video from Louisa Marika's piece up on our Facebook page. New Zealanders wanting to welcome refugees into their community will be able to apply for new sponsorship visas from next month. The sponsorship program is part of an expanded trial in which communities across Aotearoa have welcomed whānau from around the world. It's being celebrated as a way New Zealand can help with the global refugee crisis and bring Kiwi communities closer together. Anai te kairi poata, Anita Blake Person.
Nelson woman Sarah Linda McMillan and 2 friends joined together with the local St Vincent de Paul to welcome a refugee whānau to their community.
We sort of formed a pre-made family for them, basically.
The sponsorship was part of an Immigration New Zealand trial with 4 community groups welcoming 6 families and 24 refugees to different cities and towns across Aotearoa. Sarah Linda's group sponsored a young Syrian couple, covering some of their costs and helping out with all those tricky tasks in a new country.
We did sort of co-opt people to help with things like driving and learning how to swim, you know, taking people for driving lessons, getting them organised with formal lessons when that was needed, and all of that sort of thing, like you would do, you know, with your own family while getting them launched into an independent life.
It was an experience, she says, gave her a much deeper connection to her local community.
You know, we have our own set of difficulties and challenges and not everything's perfect, but overall we're pretty privileged when you look at our opportunities that most people can have access to.
Now the program is being expanded. 150 refugees will be welcomed over the next 3 years, and applications open in October for anyone wanting to be a sponsor. Immigration New Zealand's manager for refugee and migrant support, Sarah Ward, says groups can nominate someone they want to sponsor or be matched with a person in need from a broad range of countries.
Any of the UNHCR kind of identified priority areas, and then we've just overlaid that with areas that New Zealand goes to for humanitarian programs. So that's the Asia Pacific, Africa, Middle East, and the Americas.
And those being sponsored can be placed anywhere in New Zealand.
That's one of the benefits they've seen out of Canada. So instead of settlement for refugees happening in, just the main metropolitan areas, that actually a broader range of communities are supporting former refugees when they come. And obviously the side benefits of that are then you end up with a broader understanding of humanitarian situations and more diverse communities.
An umbrella organisation is being set up to help the sponsors and the refugees they're welcoming. And Sarah Ward says similar programs have been really successful in Canada and the UK.
The Canadians have a really successful program, and the UK and Ireland are doing it, and the US is looking at starting up something very similar. I think the thing that resonates around the program is this connection to community. It's about direct community action to support kind of bigger global humanitarian need.
Refugees taking part in the program need to have a basic level of English and either 3 years of work experience or 2 years of tertiary study.
What we want to do before people come is give them a real clear understanding about where their level of English puts them in relation to the job market and how those skills would be transferred when you get to New Zealand, because you don't want families coming thinking, I'm going to come and be able to do this job that I did offshore, and actually, it's not recognised by the trade qualification, or there's additional study that I need to do before I'm really employable.
Refugee Council of New Zealand committee member Pooja Sundar is incredibly pleased the program's being expanded. She says it's another way for New Zealand to help out with the global refugee crisis.
It's up to New Zealand to really, really take a good hard look at what we can do to support those people who've helped us as New Zealand in the past, families, those who haven't, just as out of general human kindness, to ensure that New Zealand does step up and do our part, if not more than our part, in ensuring those who are going through a difficult time elsewhere have a home here.
New Zealand increased its refugee quota from 1,000 to 1,500 from last year, but COVID forced a pause on arrivals. Around 210 people were scheduled to have arrived in the country so far this year.
After an extended absence, Rugby's Heartland Championship returns tomorrow afternoon. New Zealand's 12 smallest provincial unions haven't played for almost 2 years as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. As Brenton Van Nistelrooy reports, there's a mixture of relief and excitement amongst the Heartland teams that the season is going ahead.
We'll have the last say. They are delighted. They win the Meads Cup for the 4th time. North Otago.
It has been 691 days since North Otago celebrated winning the symbol of Heartland Rugby supremacy. Tomorrow, North Otago coach Jason Forrest and his team will finally start their Meads Cup defence when they host East Coast in Oamaru.
It's been a long time since that final, so it's just that buzz around now. And we had a really good training last night, and it's a bit of the unexpected around all the Heartland teams with no competition last year, and it's going to be very interesting.
The 2020 Heartland Championship was a casualty of the COVID-19 pandemic. And when the country plunged into lockdown just days out from the start of this season, Hoa Whenua Kapiti coach Chris Wilton feared the worst.
We're all at training and all the boys were sort of gathered around the phone watching Jacinda there talk about it, and the way she was talking, we all had a bit of a look on our face, because after a whole year last year of planning and then not having to play, and then it's like, we're going to do this again, that would have been disheartening to say the least.
The changing of alert levels last week lifted spirits and ensured the 2021 season could start. The Heartland Championship will still feature 8 weeks of round robin, followed by finals, but will finish in mid-November, 3 weeks later than originally scheduled. The delay has meant that all teams have lost players because of work commitments, and West Coast Rugby Chief Executive Mike Connors says they may struggle to field a team if they have too many injuries.
Because what we must take into account is our club competitions finished in mid-July, and here we are 2 months later, haven't started the Heartland competition. So those sort of people
it would be very hard to get out to play rep football at that stage.
Despite the challenges, all 12 Heartland provinces are welcoming the competition's return. King Country General Manager Kurt McQuilkin says it's much needed for their players' mental well-being.
There's a lot of camaraderie in there, and I think it's for the betterment of our provinces and provinces like us that this rugby program gets up and running, because it certainly does help out our men week in, week out.
Level 2 restrictions mean fans will have to wait a bit longer to see their teams in action, but a number of provinces are live streaming their matches tomorrow. West Coast and Horowhenua Kapiti will square off in the opening match at John Sturgeon Park in Greymouth from 2 o'clock, with the remaining 5 matches in Westport or Amaru, Masterton, Whanganui and Te Kuiti following half an hour later.
To the United States now, where one man and his small dog have taken on the world, literally. Mike Mitchell and his little Shih Tzu has taken to the footpath every single day for 8 years, adding up their steps on Mike's Apple Watch along the way. Mike now reckons he and his wee mate have walked the equivalent of the circumference of the planet. CNN's Patrick Enslow explains.
I love to walk, and Chance loves to walk.
Mike Mitchell thinks the world of his dog, Chance.
We live together. We're 2 peas in a pod, kind of, you know. Except for he doesn't clean the house. I do that.
Together, the pair pounds the pavement every day, rain or shine, the many miles adding up to planetary proportions.
Somehow we managed to walk the distance around the planet. I think it's remarkable that my little dog can walk around the planet.
For the past 8 years, they've walked more than 24,901 miles, the same distance as the circumference of the Earth.
Doing a lot of double-digit walks in the morning. You know, we go out and get 10, 12 miles, and then come back and have a little meal and, you know, maybe take a power nap.
Mitchell has kept track since 2013 and says they've averaged about 3,000 miles a year.
Something miraculous happened with my connection with a little dog. You know, I mean, I give him a lot of credit for being a great teacher and saving my bacon in some ways.
The relationship began on Mitchell's 60th birthday when he found a litter of puppies on Craigslist in Wasilla, and taking a chance, ended up with a new best friend.
He was the most beautiful one, and I was the first person there, and I said, I'll take him, you know, and that was that. Everything went so easily. It was almost like it was ordered up by an unseen force. You know? Very quickly came to the conclusion, I got to take another chance at this. And it just was the perfect name for this little dog. He's a second chance.
Before that, the now 68-year-old battled many health issues.
I had a surgery when I was a young man, and I acquired hepatitis C, and carried it for a very long time. And most people didn't make it, but I was lucky.
He was also overweight. In this photo from 2010, Mitchell says he weighed 230 pounds.
It was a journey. It was a journey I wouldn't wish upon anybody.
But by and through chance, the motivation Mitchell needed. Together, they've taken on the world one step at a time.
When you get to the top of a mountain, you have 2 ways to go. Either go down to the valley or head for the next mountaintop. And I think the view of the next mountaintop looks good.
While all those Aucklanders in level 4 can appreciate that if they're doing laps around the block. Let's get to some of your feedback before we head off on the border in Australia. This person says it should be based on the whole of Australia and strict conditions on a COVID vaccination passport, like red flights through Auckland only. This is the Trans-Tasman bubble. It's because of the border jumpers that came at the end of last school holidays, says Lynn in Tauranga. Someone else says a bubble with Tasmania, please. One case, a New South Wales traveller in about 16 months, and a proper hard border with the mainland, i.e. the sea. Tasmanians are keen to come here too, and whilst the population is small, they have money to spend, not to mention a bolster to the dairy, horticulture and agricultural sectors by having a direct flight from Christchurch. On the America's Cup, this person says, team of 5 million behind the America's Cup. It's for the millionaires to have some millionaire fun. There are not that many people whose lives rise and fall on the success of the America's Cup. Outside of Auckland, not many at all. Who's he kidding, trying to copy the COVID team buying in to conquer COVID. America's Cup, not 5 million. Who cares? No way. Get real. This does not matter to that many people. Pay for your own fun, this person says. Yeah, tell us what you really think. That's all we've got time for. The late news will keep you updated throughout the night. On Nights with Brian Crump, Sonic Tonic marks the 80th anniversary of the government abolishing flogging as a punishment.
Kia ora tātou, RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Ko Sarah Thompson, tōko ingoa. Members of the South African community have left flowers and messages outside the Timaru home where 3 young children were killed last night. Police say the family had only left MIQ a week ago after returning from South Africa. The case of 6 provincial rugby players who wrongly obtained exemptions to travel out of Auckland's level 4 lockdown is now in the hands of police. And French Polynesia has evacuated 12 COVID patients to Paris for medical help. Nearly 600 people have died. Those are your headlines. Our next news update is at 7.
Now you've caught up with the news, let RNZ podcasts take you places you've never been before.